mysticism and New Age and occult and paganism.
The best results I've ever got spiritually was literally praying to Jesus. That was the best result I've ever got in my life.
My friend John is a Christian now, but for decades he practiced occult and New Age spirituality. And his journey of adventurous truth-seeking is incredible. And I think it has something to teach all of us about how to experience God. So enjoy. Oh, and don't forget to check out the chapters in the playhead below.
There are no core beliefs in New Age and paganism. It's an umbrella term, covers a lot of beliefs. So the word the occult means just secret knowledge passed on from generation to generation, not really meant for the average person. Those seekers looking for truth, wanting to basically looking for enlightenment, and that's where I was basically at the time. As to get to your first question. What led to the New Age spirituality? I was raised a Christian, and as a teenager, it really didn't do anything for me, and it was considered the forbidden fruit. So tarot, Wicca, Ouija boards, the Satanic Bible was actually one of the first books I ever read, and those things were all really low-hanging fruit.
Like they're easy things to get into, or like you just go to the store and buy it? Like, what do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean by low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, well, okay. I guess what was attractive was things that are kind of spooky and scary. The Ouija board was spooky and scary. Tarot cards were spooky and scary, kind of fringy. Heck, even incense. I remember burning incense as a teenager, and my mom thought I was worshiping the devil. She had no idea. This is during the time of the Satanic Panic. So for younger viewers in the 80s, games like Dungeons and Dragons, they thought teenagers were, I guess, worshiping the devil, summoning demons, and really just a bunch of kids playing the game. But it's just the symbolism, the monsters, the lore of Dungeons and Dragons. It was a little scary for some parents, and a lot of misinformation about alternative paths. What got me interested, it was went to a friend's house one time, and he had a copy of the Necromonicon. I don't know if you know what that is. Have you heard of that word?
No, I know necro is it like Book of the Dead? Like, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Necro is just, I think, dead or death or something. I don't know.
So as a Christian, like as a Christian teen, right? That's like forbidden fruit. You're not supposed to go there. You're not supposed to look at it. My friend had a copy of the Necromonicon and the Satanic Bible on a shelf. So I naturally, what is this? And started reading it, and wow, this is fringe and edgy. The Necromonicon is not a real book. It's based on the writer H.P. Lovecraft. It's part of his mythos. And so, but as a teenager, I didn't know that. This is before Google. We're talking the 80s. So I just thought it was a cool, neat, scary book. I mean, it really just comes down to it. It's an evil book. It's all about summoning ancient elder gods that are bent on the destruction of mankind. So it's just pure fiction, which I did not know at the time, right? And for me, it was more of a thrill of forbidden, low-hanging fruit. Like, that's kind of the lowest book you can get in the shelf. It's the easiest to pick up. And without Google, you just assume that it's, this ancient knowledge. But in a lot of the occult books that I read, really, there was not a lot of fact-checking involved. People were looking for the new best thing, or maybe looking for ancient wisdom. And a lot of it's superstitious nonsense. I mean, I can attest to it. I've been there, I practice it. And the superstitious part of it was there in the beginning for me. It was very, very appealing. It was spooky and scary. But as I started reading more, I realized, well, there's meditations. There's meditations can help you. Basically, there's books to help improve your life, to make you a better person. And that's what really got me into it. So the first part, the low-hanging fruit, was scary and edgy. Then all of a sudden, there's this idea of self-development. You can be a better person. There's this ancient wisdom that's been passed on through generations. I guess the best example I can give you is the film The Matrix, where Neo, he's a neophyte. He is on the beginning of a journey. He meets Morpheus. And what does Morpheus want or offer him?
Escape, enlightenment, I suppose. Yeah, like the reality. He shows him a different level of reality.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is to wake up. And Morpheus is the idea of one of those great awakened masters. And that's what kind of the occult what drew me to it was the idea that, maybe there's more to this life. Maybe we're living in an illusion. I didn't realize down the road I'd find my Morpheus in real life, which would be Jesus Christ, the great awakened master. It's kind of a loose comparison, but, that's what I was looking for. And I think a lot of people were too. And so there's basically what comes with that is all these spiritual exercises and ancient rituals from like, hundreds of years ago that are supposed to help develop you and improve your consciousness.
I think that that's like a human longing, this desire to be like, to go on the journey, to be transformed. And then it says something to the human condition that we all have this feeling like we need to wake up from where we are into something that's more real, something that's more alive. And if that's like what drew you into the occult, then I think everyone has that longing, and you just went to the occult to satisfy that longing. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I mean, again, there's a lot of people I met on the path were wounded to some degree or another.
Right.
I think I've told you the story before. I don't know if your viewers have heard it. I went to an alchemy workshop, and that on itself is pretty weird, like going to an actual place where a guy has an alchemy lab set up, and there's people in a stadium watching this and wanting to learn about alchemy. But there's a lady a few rows behind me.
Yeah.
And she had a German accent, and she yelled out halfway, through the lecture, "Is this the medicine that'll make me better?" And, it's a kind of a cringy moment, and we're all looking and, not sure what to do. But it was obvious she's hurting. This woman back there was had, needed something, and she's looking for the medicine that'll make her feel better. And a lot of people there are doing the exact same thing. Right. I mean, turning to alternative paths because maybe the path they're on or the path they didn't discover yet is going to heal them. Same reason with some of us will leave a doctor to go try an alternative therapy in order to get better. So I found a lot of people were wounded.
I'd love to hear how it is you came to this place of becoming a follower of Jesus. So take me through that story.
This is like my favorite part of my story, actually, because it's the point in my life where I had the most intense relationship with God during the height of, I guess, my occult practice, I suppose. So I was into what's called ceremonial magic, and there's a group called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn from the 1800s. Aleister Crowley was a part of that. And there's quite a few famous people at the time. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was like a version of the Masons. So the rituals that the Masons have, basically they're kind of swept aside or under the rug. And the Golden Dawn, the idea behind the Golden Dawn was, well, let's take those rituals and let's start using them and see what happens. Like, can they develop you and make you a better person? So this is like this is no longer low-hanging fruit kind of stuff. Like, we're talking like like, how do you connect to God? The Kabbalah is literally the idea behind this kind of ladder. Like, the lowest part of the ladder is where you are, and as you go up this ladder of lights, you're self-improving. You're making yourself to the point where you're purifying yourself so you can better know God. And so that's pretty appealing, right? That seems like a legit sort of path, and the idea is you're connecting with people that have more wisdom than you. Now, that being said, I have not met many people on the path that were that wise. I was really looking, and I just couldn't find them. And, I not from lack of trying. So at the time, we're talking in the 90s now, I was working in Montreal with a woman named Carmen Whitehouse. And I would love, if you're watching this, I would love to connect with you. I've lost your phone number. She was a Christian lady, and I was working at her daycare. So she was running this daycare, and I was assisting the program. So I was very open about being pagan. I had a pentagram, and I also had a very strong view of what Christians were: ignorant, not open-minded, not very loving, not very forgiving. I just had this really kind of a narrow view of what a Christian was. And I think that's part of, the culture at the time, books I read, even the media and televangelists. I got to tell you, they didn't help the scene at all. That was what I learned. So Carmen's there, and she's this, lady who is basically has a Wiccan, or somebody who identifies as, that's what I called myself at the time, was, a pagan, I guess, under that umbrella term. And so what is she going to do with this guy who's in her program? How is she going to deal with him? Well, she did what any good Christian would. She invited me to her house, had me over for dinner. I spent time with her son playing video games. She took me to church. I went to my first church since I was a kid. It was a Baptist church. And I was really surprised at how progressive they were. They had drums, they had guitars. I'd never seen that before. And So I think Carmen had planted seeds, right? She was a forgiving, kind, caring person who totally accepted me for who I was, which in retrospect I did not appreciate, but I do now. I realize, wow, like what an amazing person. And she must have planted a seed, because around that time I had this born again moment. So pretty much at the height of um, my spiritual practices. I also have an anxiety disorder, so I do get panic attacks, and it's a gift of I have the gift of anxiety. So I was having a really bad panic attack, and I broke down and prayed. I would never do that kind of thing, but I always prayed to the goddess. I always prayed. I like the duality of God and goddess, the masculine and feminine. I really like the king queen thing. I love that symbolism, and I really related to the feminine aspect, and that was part of my spiritual journey. So praying to God was very weird, and praying to just a monotheistic God was very strange. I prayed to God like I was a kid. My heart opened up, and I felt tremendous love. It was an amazing experience. My first thought after this, like just breaking down and just sort of giving up and opening myself up to God and literally just like falling into his arms, was, oh my God, I had a born again moment. I do not want to be a born again Christian. I literally thought, oh, what happened to me? I was really, really upset about that, more than the transformative experience I just went through. It was tremendous. And to cement that moment, I to calm myself down, I went to my roommate's room, and I grabbed the CD, and he has a good CD collection. So I grabbed one, I put it on, and it was the band Jars of Clay, and the song was Flood. And I just like, I just couldn't wrap my head around the connection that this moment of connecting with God, and the first music I put on, like just minutes later, is Flood. And that song to this day just still moves me. It just really, it's just a very powerful song to me. So that didn't change me though, but that definitely was that seed, I think, that maybe Carmen had planted, or God was working through me or with me. And this was in the 90s, and it wasn't until 2019 that I got baptized, but something had happened there.
It sounds like something that, yeah, you're definitely very much against, and something that you're resisting, but for whatever reason you broke down and you prayed to God. And then, fair to say, you had like an intense experience of God's love in that moment.
Yes, very much so.
Tangible.
Yeah. My rational brain took over, and I decided that, it wasn't a born again moment, even though it still stuck with me. Because I remember years later, like 2016 or so, I was talking to a friend who was a Christian, and first time ever I told the story of what happened to me. Like I waited that long to tell anyone because I was kind of embarrassed about it. But it definitely had an effect on me. But my rational brain wrote it off, and when I became Christian too, the same thing. My rational brain was like trying to wrestle with my heart, and it didn't match up, because my logical brain didn't. So that's what he did. I wrote it off. My logical brain said, it's just it's a psychological trick, and there's no value in it.
And I think you said it was 23 years before you got baptized. So obviously 23 years is a long time, but how did that journey continue over those years?
Yeah, my interest in the occult was definitely still there. And it wasn't until I was working I started working in childcare, and, from the 90s till 2000s. And one of my students, her name is Rachel. Her parents were, according to the staff at the school that I worked at, they were the crazy Christians. And so I had my eyes out for them, because what crazy Christians are like. But when I, had spent time with the mom, because we'd go for coffee sometimes, just, kind of gossip about the school and talk about her daughter. She never talked about Christianity. She was like the furthest thing from a crazy Christian. And the husband, Paul, I didn't really connect with him too much, but turns out years later, he became, one of my good friends and mentors. But I was starting to look at Christianity a little bit more, and I was starting to think more about it. And honestly, one of the big catalysts for me was the film The Shack. And that really transformed me in a huge way. And my heart opened up again. I'm like, oh my gosh, God is definitely here. Like there's definitely something happening, something moving here. And all these sort of doors started opening and pointing towards Christ. That film portrayed God in a way I'd never seen God before. It wasn't the God that I was used to as a kid. As a child, God was an angry God. God was one who punished you. You better not do anything wrong. And I was always on watch. And if I did something wrong, I felt really guilty all the time. And I didn't like that feeling. That wasn't a loving, kind God, but that's the God that I was raised with. That's what I thought God was. In The Shack, I was presented with a loving God, a God that loved you and cared for you, saw the big picture. Like in the book of Jonah, at the end, God's talking to Jonah and just like presenting this big picture of the world that we can't see. And in the film, they just sort of portrayed that this loving, kind God. If I see the actress who played God in the film, Octavia, I can't remember her last name. If I see her in real life, I'm going to cry. I'm going to want to hug her because she did such a great job with that film, playing the role of Papa. And that really changed how I viewed Christians and the idea of Jesus, like having this best friend, this brother that you can sit and talk with and hang out with, and the healing that the main character went through. If this is Christianity, please sign me up. Again, my heart was just, I cry every time I see the film. I still do. Just that is the God I want in my life. And that's the God I found. And that's not the God that I was raised with, but it's the one that's present and there in my life right now.
Are these experiences weakening your commitment to these occult practices? And like, how is that affecting where you're at that point in like the occult community, trying to climb up the ladder to God?
I started going to church like a little bit when Pastor Brent was the main pastor at Sunnyside. I went there a couple times, but I kind of went there just as to see what it was like. I mean, I'm being drawn this way. I'll check it out reluctantly, and I didn't really feel anything. And I'm not sure what I'm doing here. And my expectations of going to church was like, you have to wear your Sunday best. You got to be in your best behavior. You can't be genuine and authentic. Like that's basically what I thought church was all about. So I was kind of reluctantly dipping my toes in the water. And then I realized, I guess with Pastor Carey, that I can just sort of come as I am, just go to church as I am. I'm not there. Now, here's the big thing. This is really, I want to make sure that I'm clear to your viewers. If you went to go see a New Age speaker, you paid good money to go see a New Age speaker. Listen to somebody sit on literally actually like a can't pronounce the word, but like a throne, and wearing robes, and you listen to them, shoot words of wisdom. You spend quite a few of your hard-earned money just to listen to them. You walk away, and what do they get for it? You spend a lot of money on books, going to workshops, going to church. You're not really spending money. Don't tell Joy, the accountant, that I said that. But you're not spending a lot of money when you go to church, right? You're not there. It's not like a fee that you're paying. You're not there for the cult of personality. I'm not there for, I like Pastor Carey and I like you when you get up and speak, but I'm not there for you. I'm there for God. I'm there for Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different experience. It's not the cult of personality that the New Age path is. The New Age path is full of people that are sort of more or less selling themselves than the path, right? They're selling books. They're selling their audio tapes. They're selling their lectures, and you're basically buying the hope that it's going to make you feel better, the hope that you're going to become a better person. Well, church wasn't like that. I was very surprised that I can come a sloppy mess, and I love the idea of that. You can go as a sloppy mess, and Jesus is going to love you regardless. I had a hard time with the word sin, but I finally wrapped my head around it. But the idea that I can go and, I've made mistakes and I can still be in love for those mistakes. And, and the idea that here is a path that I can become a better person on. That's very appealing. And that's all the stuff I was looking for that I wasn't getting in any other path. Christianity all of a sudden offered this up, and it wasn't through the Bible, yes, but it wasn't through books. It wasn't through pamphlets. It wasn't through things that I paid for. It wasn't through lectures or workshops. It was just, I sat in church, you prayed, and your heart just filled. And it was an amazing experience, amazing feeling. To this day, it's still an amazing experience, an amazing feeling. My friend said, well, that's only because there's music, there's people, you're getting wrapped up in the excitement of the church. And I said, well, no, because I still get the feeling when I'm sitting out in the park. I still get the feeling when I pray at home. God's still there. I never had that presence, that sense of love and joy and happiness and sense of peace. Peace is huge. And I think that's what we're all looking for, right?
It's so powerful to hear. In fact, you're probably discussing experiencing God in a lot of ways that tons of people, especially those who are doubting their faith, like desperately long for. So without realizing it, people might be listening and going like, oh, wow, what do you have? Because I want that. It's like even within Christianity, I think a lot of people don't get that strong sense that you're talking about, John. And I don't know, I can't label every single person, but I would like to put on the table and suggest that I think it might be because a lot of people have this idea of God where you have to come, you have to perform, you have to be good enough, where God is angry and he's mad at you and he's not just gushing with unconditional love for you. And so it's like, it seems like your ability to understand those things and accept them is making you open to them. And yet, like a lot of Christians have a hard time experiencing that same thing. And I wonder if it's because so many people have a hard time not seeing a caricature of God rather than who God actually is. I have another question for you. When did you feel like you weren't resisting this journey anymore? And when you started like willingly walk on this journey with Jesus?
I think the day that I told Jody we're going to church, and I dragged Jody to church. That's my wife. So I think when but I think I was in church one day and it was communion, and it was actually a funny moment actually because you were there that day, and I really I felt like I want to do communion, and I really do. Jody comes from a Catholic background, and so you can only do communion. I can't remember. There's like a rule for it. And anyway, so I didn't fit into her memory of what that rule is. So I was getting ready to stand up and do communion. I psyched myself up and I was ready to get up and go to the table. Like the calling was there. It was Pastor Darren at the time was leading that part of the service. And Jody's like, no, you can't go. But and I was heartbroken, crestfallen. I was hurt that I couldn't go to the table. That was a major moment for me. I actually remember I got up and left. I was angry. I was so angry at my wife. And she didn't know, she just didn't know that anyone can go to the table. So I got up and I left. Actually, you were there and I was like, oh, Pastor Matt, sorry, I should go talk to you. But I didn't want to have all these emotions come out because I was really, really upset. I was kind of hurt, right? My heart was ready to go. But I think, that was a major moment, right? For me, that I felt part of the church. I felt part of God. I felt a connection to Jesus. And the baptism is really what cemented it. But it was a process of, I guess, the heart and the brain weren't quite connected, right? And so, the heart felt amazing during church, but my brain was like, well, yeah, but there's all these things that I don't believe about Christianity. And, I look at the Bible. The Bible's hard to read. The Old Testament is really difficult. I remember reading about Lot and his daughters. Right. And after, they left Sodom and Gomorrah, like, that's not fun to read that part of the book right there. And the fact that I closed the Bible, I closed the Bible that day. And the next day I was just like, I'm done with this. I wasn't impressed at all. I couldn't understand that. I was at work and one of my students, she has an intellectual disability. She was there, I think it was during March break. And she, I guess her comfort zone was like finding something to grab onto at the church basement at Sunnyside and going and reading or sitting off on her own. So she would grab the children's Bible and just read it. And then that day she grabbed the regular Bible, opened it up, and it turns out she's not Christian at all. I asked her mom and dad, she's not Christian. She opened up the Bible to 1 John 4:10. And she said, I want to read to you. So she's read to me 1 John 4:10 and said, you need to write this down. She has an intellectual disability. And so I got up and I wrote down 1 John 4:10. And it was almost like maybe God was speaking through her. It was a coincidence. I don't know, but it felt like a magical moment that, don't worry. The Bible's not all like that. Here's a beautiful passage in the Bible. Here's something that's going to turn your heart around. And it did. And that was like a really nice moment. Right. And that was like one of those things that, changed my heart. And then watching more videos on the historical idea of Jesus, that he was a real person. Because I was still stuck. We've had this conversation before. I was really hung up on Jesus was just a symbol. It was an idea of a dying and resurrected God. I was very hung up on it. I read the book by Timothy Freak. That would really kind of cement it for him. My friend bought into it as well. He totally believed it too. And it wasn't until my friend had mentioned that it's all been debunked. And I'm like, that's not debunked then. This is before I started going to church that he told me that this theory had been debunked. And he gave me the information and I read it and looked at it, and he had become a Christian. And I didn't realize it at the time. He was probably still in the closet. But that really changed my heart too. All of a sudden I realized, well, Jesus could have been a real person. That's huge. So, that was a sticking point for me. And once I discover that, well, wait a second, this could be real. It's not just a symbol. Then my brain now is connecting to my heart, and I started having a logical understanding of Christianity to match what my heart was feeling. And once they were congruent, going to church was a much better experience, and that kind of like brought me home.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying, because it's really like actually something I've been thinking a lot about this past month, is the idea, like so with Truth Snack, I've done a lot of like, I did a video on like, is Jesus a myth, Jesus mythicism. And we've interacted on that. And it's like, there's this temptation to go this really intellectual side, like, hey, there's a question, or like, what do you do with this difficult passage in the Bible? Or like, does God exist? Is there like, is there evidence and deductive arguments? And like the intellectual side is really good. But what I love about the conversation I'm having with you today is that like you've had these intense experiential, emotional, like aspects of your faith that end up being an apologetic in themselves, in the sense that they are a reason for you to continue on your journey with Jesus and to really be following Jesus. And so it's like you're actually bringing these, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you just said was like, the emotional was really good, but I needed to know that there was some intellectual side behind this too, where it's like Jesus was a real person. What I'm reading in the Bible, like there's actually something historical behind it. And it's funny because a lot of people listening to this interview might actually have the other thing, where it's like, well, I've heard the apologetics about Jesus, and I've heard about like, the Bible hasn't been hopelessly corrupted and all that, but they might be seeking that other side where it's like, well, I want this like emotional, experiential part of God, where it's not just intellectual, but it's actually emotional. So what's like that happening in your story is beautiful and profound for every adventurous truth seeker, because like it has to be both of those things together. You're like, we're not meant to separate them. Certainly with God, like we're meant to know him in this really rich, deep way that's neither like deficient by only being intellectual or by only being emotional.
The experiences that I'm talking about right now, I did not have in the New Age or occult path that I was on. So like, I just want to make sure somebody's thinking, well, maybe he's got a chemical imbalance and he feels that way all the time. It's not even close. I never had those experiences. So I just want to make sure it's clear. When I became Christian, I didn't have those feelings. Like, there were some, neat kind of moments. There's some neat synchronicities and coincidences that happen with people. But none of the ritual magic that I ever did really kind of had that same experience that I had with Christ. So just want to make sure that's clear. It was a very, very different experience entirely.
You mentioned earlier that your baptism was kind of this like solidifying moment. You didn't say past the point of no return, but maybe I'm calling it that. Like, was it this like point of no return where like I'm now following Jesus? Like, why was that so significant to you?
Well, I mean, I do like the idea of symbols, and I like the idea of rituals. So here is a ritual that you can do, getting baptized. And getting baptized was a commitment to Jesus in front of a lot of people too. Like I can't BS the crowd. So, it's a chance to kind of, but not only to them, but really to myself. It's a symbolic moment. So I really wanted the symbolism part of it. I don't know if you heard of Michael Heiser. I really, really connect with him as an author and as a podcaster. And he helps break down some of the difficult parts of the Bible. He said, when you get baptized, and again, I could be, stepping into murky waters here, but you're it's like you're dipping into the underworld and you're looking at shale and everything that's in shale, and you're coming back out again. I can be part of God's world. That's a neat little idea, that sort of symbolism there, part of the Baptist component. So the baptism is just by itself, though, with Gilles, my mentor, being there with me, and Pastor Carey, who I adore. It was just a neat symbolic moment and a way of like cementing my arrival and sort of making a commitment. So to answer your question, I like the symbolic part of it. And it was a nice little sort of a ritual to do, and maybe my last sort of official ritual magic that I can do. That's sort of genuine and has meaning and purpose behind it.
A lot of Christians love God. They want to know God desperately, but they feel like they don't know how to hear from God. How do you hear from God? Because it sounds like you've had some experiences in your life when you really heard from God in some special ways.
when I talk about hearing from God, it really feels like your heart is full. It feels like sometimes Jesus is right there with me. In fact, I have a little exercise that I do, and maybe some people can try this. When I'm out enjoying the trees, I'll just sort of invite God into that space with me, enjoy the trees with me, and look through them through my eyes, and I feel God's presence there. Invite Jesus to walk with me, or to experience something simple like petting my cat, and like how wonderful it feels and how much I love my cat. And when I'm at church, it's really a sense that your body is full of love, and it's a tremendous experience. Yeah, there's a great sense of peace. I'll give you an example. 2020 was a very rough year for a lot of people. I don't want to have a pity party for me, but my father passed away, my aunt passed away, my cat passed away, and my best friend passed away in 2020.
Wow.
It was a really rough year. And, I by all accounts, I should have broken down, a bit more upset than I was. God's peace was with me the whole time. It made the process so much easier. I think if that had happened before I got baptized, it would be a very hard year. I might have been very despondent, depressed, angry, perhaps. It was very challenging. There was a lot of work to do, not a lot of people around to help during 2020, during that process. So, we had to be apart from each other, but God was definitely not apart from me. God was there. My wife was with me, and it made the experience a lot easier. So those difficult times, those challenges, God's there, and it makes it a lot easier. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I feel.
It does. You're just expressing a different way about thinking about hearing from God than a lot of people think. I think they want like a miraculous or a sign, or some person comes up with like a prophetic word. God told me to tell you this, or like God is going to like give me like an audible voice for me to hear. But you're talking about experiencing God in a very, like, it's very simple, but it's very real, that it's like, I'm looking at a beautiful tree and I'm saying, hey, God, like, let's enjoy this tree together. And you feel God's presence like that. That is just beautiful and simple, but yet so different from how many Christians who are struggling with their faith are trying to connect with God. They're trying, it's almost more coercive. Like, I'm trying to get God to talk to me in some way, rather than reflecting God, which is just inviting God into these instances with us. So that's pretty incredible.
I think we spend so much time divorced from God. We're distracted constantly, right? I mean, drugs, alcohol, video games, entertainment. There's so many things we do, and we're missing out the moment. And moments matter. They're really important. Like I mentioned, when I got baptized, I had that baptism buzz, and just everything was so beautiful. So I just invite God, like, enjoy the tree with me. And it's a really simple little moment. And God wants to experience our love. He wants to experience the things, our love, our happiness. He wants to be there with us. And if we think of God as being really far above us and something that's unattainable, or that Jewish word that I use, Ein Sof, the unknowable, we're never going to be with God. So invite him into the space with you. It's not really inviting him into the space. Just, I think God's already there.
Right.
You've just got to take a moment to open up and be with God.
Right.
And so what I mentioned, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, it's almost like not even inviting God into the space. It's like opening up your heart to God in the space, because God is already there with you. Yeah. What else were you going to say?
Well, I that's a good way of explaining. I think that's where we're just constantly distracted, and we just have to realize that God is with us constantly. Opening your heart up is huge, right? And I think the better question is not how do I connect with God? How do I let go of my barriers, let go of my ego, to make space for God to come into my life? And that's what was transformative for me, coming to Sunnyside, was making space for God, letting go of my ego. And that's not easy to do. That is hard, right? Letting go of your beliefs, letting go of your traumas, your fears, right. And then when that's making space for God to come in. So that could be the answer right there.
Right. It's almost like, because it's like letting go of your fears and traumas is so hard. I mean, like, in a sense, God doesn't want you to just like ignore them or bury them. He wants you, and this is maybe what we're getting at. The hardest part is being willing to open that part up to God and trust that he's not going to trample on your hurt heart, but actually care for it and help it heal. Yeah. So that's pretty, like, it's just a different way of thinking about connecting with God.
Well, another good word is being vulnerable, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. We do have our guards up quite a bit. And for me, that was part of my process, was allowing myself to be vulnerable and literally, in difficult moments to fall into his arms. I know it's a symbolic thing. Maybe it's a difficult visual, but literally just fall back and trust that God will take you through this moment. And that's worked for me. And that's how I've experienced God, and that's how I'm experiencing the Bible. And this is what's transformed my life, at 52 years old, right? And all the years previous, I didn't have any of those experiences. There was there was vague hints of it, but yeah, nothing like I'm having right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful, like imagery, and it's poetic language, of course, but it's like, it's reflecting something real, which is like falling into God's arms. It requires trust. It requires intimacy. It requires like an action from us, like not to earn it, but just to go, okay, I'm willing to go there with God and open up to these things that we might need, like healing on, or just whatever journey God has for us. How does it feel now, having been at some points kind of having this really negative perception of church and Christians and the Bible and even words like sin? How do you handle, or how are you handling now using that label in some level, calling yourself a Christian or a follower of Jesus, going to church and loving the Bible, as you've said before? How does that sit with you? Does it feel hard to accept?
It does a little bit. I'll give you an example. One time I went to a doctor's office, and I wore my pentagram. I wore it all the time, really. And the doctor was Christian, and kind of, instead of like seeing if I was okay with the flu that I was going through, like being sick and looking for medicine, more or less criticizing me for the pentacle I was wearing. I'm like, I'm just, like I said, I'm just here to be healed. I don't want to be judged. I don't want. I'm not here for that reason. And so when I think of the term Christian, I'm okay with it, but I'm a little worried about other people think. So I'm a little cautious, right? Because if I had some of the thoughts about Christians, and my sort of worldview, other people do too. I do have friends that are definitely not Christian; they're atheists, and I haven't come out of the closet to them. But if I was to say that I was Christian, not quite. I had a bad reaction with one of my friends. He assumed all the same things I assumed. Assumed I was going to lecture him. I was going to try and convert him. Assumed that I was brainwashed. And here's the other thing about becoming a Christian. If you're on the fence and you're watching this and you think going to church is going to brainwash you, there's nobody brainwashing you there. I got to tell you, there's nobody there preaching. There's nobody there. Sorry, well, the pastor is preaching. There's nobody there
there's
trying to convert you.
There's some preaching.
Yeah. But there's nobody there trying to convert you. It was all done on my own. I wasn't there for like all the perks of being a Christian. There wasn't a free toaster at the end of the day. I wasn't there for that reason. So I think my friends just assume that you're brainwashed. You're part of a cult. Those are all things that the baggage that comes with the word Christian. And you had mentioned like what makes you a confident Christian. Well, telling people I'm a Christian, I don't have a lot of confidence in that sometimes. It's getting there. Talking to you right now is really putting me out there in the world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that. And I will just say, like, as someone who's been a Christian leader, and in many ways I'm still leading, people and trying to help them with Truth Snack. Maybe the best way to say it is churches that are being like Jesus are not brainwashing you, are not stressing you and pushing you and coercing you to being and doing and believing. Sadly, I think also that can happen, but it sounds like, I think your journey and your story is a great illustration for the love and acceptance and incredible patience of Jesus, that, your journey is like 24, 25 years of you slowly journeying towards Jesus and then journeying with him. And so like, yeah, I appreciate that. I love that your experience with church was that, even though there was literally preaching, it wasn't like you were being preached at, that if you like didn't completely accept everything all at once, you had to be rejected. So that's actually like beautiful. Yeah. I'm really like thrilled. I think that reflects the heart of God.
Well, one thing I was surprised when I was reading the Bible, understanding Christian culture, Christianity as a whole, that there were a lot of things that I'd read in other faiths or other spiritual books and beliefs that were in the Bible, and like there is like a lot of crossover. I think anyone really on a spiritual journey, there is going to be some parallels for sure, and there's definitely parallels in a little bit in Buddhism, a little bit in Taoism. Some of the the paths that have more wisdom in them and a little bit older, for sure. And again, they open the door to kind of lead me to where I am right now. So I have a lot of respect for people on different paths, that they're on a journey as well. And there's I think God is basically trying to touch all of our hearts. And maybe you're on a different path. I was on a different path and God touched my heart. You might be a Taoist and God has touched your heart. You may be a Muslim and you may be practicing Zen Buddhism, or a Buddhist and God has touched your heart. So I those bit of wisdom, they kind of transfer over to where I am right now. And also I think vice versa, the wisdom in the Bible is reflected in other paths a little bit. I think there's kernels of truth, spiritual truths everywhere.
Yeah, I think a lot of Christians would hear that, and then like I can almost hear the hearts of those people going, well then who cares? Like, well then why be a Christian, John? Like, why not just be, John's religion? And he's picked up kernels of truth from everywhere. Like, why then follow Jesus? Like, for you as a personal question, like if there's kernels of truth everywhere, why not continue just going around picking up the kernels everywhere? Like, why have you settled on following Jesus?
Yeah, well, I think Christianity has a greater package deal. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a greater package deal for sure. I can take kernels of wisdom, but I'd rather hold a whole box of popcorn. So I'm getting the whole box of popcorn versus a little bit here and there.
So you find that in Jesus?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, I mean, that's such a great, like, great way of saying it. Like, I don't want the kernels. I want the full meal deal is what you're saying. You want the full meal
definitely.
deal. And you're finding, yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that's a great answer, that like you're finding.
Well, I mean,
yeah, no, go ahead.
I mean, the symbolism of the meal of that will be fed and our thirst will be quenched. I really get that. It's a nice symbolism, but I really get the sense that I'm being full and I'm not thirsty anymore. And so my quest for knowledge, my quest for wisdom is fulfilled in Christianity, where it wasn't before. I was hungry and thirsty quite a bit, walking through a desert, many deserts, and all the deserts had different colors and flavors to them. But this is no longer a desert. It's lush and green, and there's a lot of nice people in it. And you got some great songs and music. So it's definitely a good experience. Yeah.
Right. And what you're doing is like it's so interesting because you're just giving this beautiful experiential argument for following Jesus, which is, it's really convincing for you because you've been satisfied by Jesus. And so you're going like, well, why the need to go to all these different places when I'm finding my fulfillment here? It's almost like in John, when Jesus talks about eat my flesh, drink my blood, and then a whole bunch of people abandon him. And then he looks at the disciples and says, are you going to leave me too? And then I think Peter goes, to whom else shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And so Peter's like, well, I could leave, but then I would be separating myself from this like life-giving person, this life-giving source that I've like come to know.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Yeah, I mean, I love the symbolism of communion. I mean, going to the table and eating. It's such a small little act, but there's so much to it. It feels like I'm part of a greater community, and it's just that little piece of bread is filling my soul, filling my heart, and making me feel like I'm at the table of Jesus. I didn't get that feeling before.
So you mentioned like occult means secret knowledge. Sometimes people treat the Bible like it is a book to be decoded that has secret knowledge. People really do that with like books like Revelation, and there's like an old trend like the Bible code, where they're like literally like using algorithms on the text to try to like decipher hidden meanings. Like, do you think that sometimes these mindsets that can exist in the occult can actually like cross this bridge into Christianity? Do you think Christians treat Christianity in an occult, mystical way? Do we do that? Like,
yes.
Does that happen? Have you seen it? Tell us about that.
Yes, for sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. Sometimes I'm quite surprised to see Christians doing what they're doing because it's not much different. Maybe a different shade of New Age beliefs, for sure. Your prosperity meditations. That's just sounds like you're basically taking a page out of a New Age book. A lot of superstition. Like again, in the New Age path, there's a lot of things that people are very superstitious about. I see Christians doing as well. The Bible, you can read so much into many things. Your brain can play tricks on you all the time. And I mean, the Bible is what it is. It's laid out for you. It's a really interesting journey. It's hard to figure out from a Western mind, 3,000 years in the future. Our thought processes are very different from a First Temple Jew, right? So, it's not decoding, it's maybe understanding what a first temple Jew was thinking.
I totally agree. The process of understanding the Bible, it is a spiritual process because it's God's word, but at the same time, in the human sense of it, you're doing an intercultural study and a historical study of trying to understand an ancient culture and what this prophet or this writer was trying to say to their original audience. Could you give me some more examples or just categories of ways that Christians can almost be practicing New Age spirituality in their Christianity? Like you mentioned, prosperity meditations, superstitions. Is there anything else like that you see?
I'm trying to think of some concrete examples. Some of the the healing, the prayers, especially the televangelism, like that. Mm-hmm. That's a really good example of it is no different than Reiki, or somebody lays their hands on you and says some words to the air, and there's going to be some sort of healing done. I got to tell you, as somebody who studied and practiced polarity therapy, which is like energy healing, and I've done some Reiki in the past, and I also did some massage. A lot of it is comes from just the power of belief, and sometimes Christianity, I worry that some people, it's just the power of belief versus legitimate healing, direct connection to God and Jesus, or you're just desperate to be healed, and the first charismatic person that comes along, you're going to fall for it. And that's one thing I do worry about. So that a lot of spiritual paths, people will buy into a belief system, and their brains will trick them very easily.
Sometimes people think that these words, if I read the Bible, it will make me feel better. Or if I tell this person who's not a Christian these words, there's that one passage that says God's word doesn't return void. And I don't even really know. I'm not even going to claim to understand exactly what that passage means. I haven't done in-depth study of it. But how it's typically used is, if these words are heard, then there will be something that happens because of them. And sometimes Christians can go so you read God's word, you put the Bible on things, you pass God's word out, you preach to people. And if you're telling people God's word, then there's going to be a response. Is that, I call that a magical mindset. Is that magical? Is that a New Age kind of way of looking at it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yes. I mean, the idea behind magic is you're putting words out in the universe that are going to transform. The definition of magic, according to Aleister Crowley, is the art and science of basically changing your will, like changing the will of the world around you. So magic words will transform things. So yeah, if you want to go down that route, you're really not that far divorced from occultism, really. So the Bible is what it is. It's words on a page. It's got a message, a story for you to read. It's not there. It's not magical. There is some very smart Hebrews at the time that very cleverly designed the story for us. And I worry because that's really what I was doing. I was picking up books, reading magical words that are spells, and in order to make some sort of change happen in the universe around me or people around me. That's what witches do. That really, they cast spells in order to transform people for good or bad. And Wicca does the same thing to change nature and to change their personality, or change their environment.
To the Christians who go tarot cards, pentagrams, Ouija boards, and the Book of the Dead, the Satanic Bible, all these things are doorways to something that could be really harmful to you because it's opening up to yourself to enemies of Jesus. Like, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with it? What do you think?
Well, I do agree to a large extent. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a Christian right now. I wouldn't have. But I don't see the path that I was on is really that scary. I didn't have the experiences that some people might have talked about. I mean, I never had a scary encounter. Nothing really dramatically spiritual happened for good or bad. What I found was I was basically sort of unwrapping the wrapping paper around these weird things and realizing there's really not much to it. Like I said, the Satanic Bible was written by some dude who was just dissatisfied with life, dissatisfied with church, and wrote some words and came up with a fun religion that people probably half-heartedly believed in. There are some real satanic worshipers out there. The Temple of Set, I mean, that's pretty hardcore. That's a different story. I don't really know much about them. The Necromonicon was scary, but it's a work of fiction. The Ouija board, I do believe that you're opening yourself up to spirits and demons. I just haven't experienced them, but I do think you're since becoming a Christian, my home feels completely different. That feeling you might have gotten as a kid, maybe your viewers might have had this. If you're in the basement and you turn off the lights and you walk upstairs, that creepy feeling of like trying to get upstairs as fast as you can, turn on the lights. That's gone away. I've not had that experience since I got baptized. Any kind of fear of the dark. I can go to the basement and turn off the lights and stand there. There's like zero creepy feelings where, as a kid or a young adult, like, ooh, it's kind of spooky, right? Nothing whatsoever. So I wonder, why is that? Is it because I say the Jesus prayer quite often, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I really swear by that little prayer, and I say it often, is just that strength and believing in God and Jesus. Like, I've chased away, were there spirits in my house? Like, who knows? Maybe I did have them in there. The one thing I really want to just let viewers know that I spent a lot of time in these other paths, exploring them. And I got to say, there wasn't a lot of value in them. And really, I just want to make sure that I'm not, even though I speak positive of some of the experiences I had, and like you say, it is a journey, right? We all have our journeys. And sometimes you might have to leave the house for a bit and go and discover things where you come back to the Father. And that was my case. I don't want to make it sound like a glamorous experience in any way, shape, or form. I didn't make it sound to be as scary as some people might think it is. I don't want anybody watching this to think, well, maybe it is a path I can go check out. Really, just there's not a lot of substance to it. It's a bit of a false path in a lot of ways. And people who have been on occult paths, usually they talk about the same thing when they become Christian. I think Doreen Virtue is sort of famous for being a New Age guru and then becoming Christian. And she's very much, against the path that she was on, and feels badly for a lot of the books she read and misleading people. So I don't want anybody watching this to feel like, oh, well, maybe I can check this out, dip my toes in the water and see what it's like. I really am here to say, no, don't do it. Basically, the occult path wasn't very fulfilling, and Jesus is fulfilling. That's basically what it comes down to.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing about your journey of adventurous truth seeking.
I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I hope my message will reach somebody.